Marco Rojas on the Unused Subs. Yeah, I could be AI too, right? Might not even be real.
I thought a good place for us to start here today would be to take us back 11 months when I used to work with Jacob Spoonley, and I'd cover A-League games, and we'd stay at the Ridges on Featherston in Wellington. Lovely place, always look after us.
Great breakfast.
And 11 months ago, I was in the zone where I was trying to focus on my fitness. Because we'd gone down the day before the Wellington Phoenix played the Brisbane Roar, I thought, I'll take my fitness gear and I'll hit up the Ridges Fitness Centre. Little did I know that it wasn't much of a fitness centre. It was this tiny little angular thing with a couple of free weights. It's got a pool and there's a sauna and all that's wonderful, but if you get like 2 or 3 people in the fitness centre, you're battling, man. You can't swing too many weights around.
Can't say I've ever seen the inside of the fitness centre.
No. And that shocks nobody, Spoon. That shocks nobody. I'm in there pushing huge amounts of tin, not really. And in comes this guy, Marco Rojas, and
starts out pressing you.
he was doing some rehab because he was injured at the time. But it was actually quite nice, Marco, to get away from doing that huge weight session and have a chat with you, mate, because I was wondering what the future held for you. And I think our conversation sort of led us to, Auckland FC on the horizon. Have you had much conversation with them? And then lo and behold, in the off-season, you signed for your boyhood club, the Wellington Phoenix. Great to see you, first of all, on the Unused Subs. But thanks so much for interrupting that weight session all that time ago.
No problem, anytime. I prefer not to do a weight session for the most part, so I'm happy to disrupt others from doing this.
It must be nice going back to the club that gave you that opportunity so many years ago, mate. The kind of full circle moment, I suppose, off the back of the infamous Yellow Fever scholarship.
I think it's been really nice for me to return and do that full circle moment, something that I've mentioned often since I've arrived here. There's a good chance for me to pass on my gratitude for the place and the group that helped begin the journey. Back in that stage, I guess no one, including myself, kind of knew where the journey was going to go, and to be able to come back is real special. Has been real special, and I think I also mentioned at the beginning that I felt, having been through what I've been through in the last year and a half before that, like stopping, coming back in, that having something that was familiar but quite new with the facilities and how it had grown was a really good platform to move forward. I remember being very grateful and very content arriving back here to start again.
Because you started at the Wellington Phoenix as a 17-year-old, so a teenager then, and a 33-year-old now. How different is the setup? I mean, I don't mean to call you an old man, Marco, but it has been some time.
No, it's changed. It's evolved. It's definitely evolved, yeah.
So how different is the Wellington Phoenix now compared to back in those days?
Yeah, I think facility-wise, chalk and cheese. Every single player can tell you what it was like at Newtown and what it was like to have to move between Newtown, the city, Les Mills for your gym sessions, and Freiburg for your recovery. Or Freiburg, it was chalk and cheese to what it is now, having everything there. There's a women's team now, which we didn't even have 2 teams. We just had the one senior team. It's very, very different. There are some similarities with the club and even along all of those years, but facility-wise, it's been really inspirational to have those, and it's definitely fueled energy where perhaps generally it's lacking in players above maybe 30 or in the mid-30s kind of thing.
Yeah, but the last couple of months you've been battling this ankle injury.
Yeah.
How niggly is it that you come back and we all celebrated Marco Rojas' first start, and what was it, something stupid like 5 million days, and then all of a sudden this unusual ankle injury occurs in training where it's not the outside ankle ligaments. It was the inside ankle ligaments that you injured. And how frustrating, Marco, has this last sort of 2 months been, where you're back in the fold, the results aren't going your way, and you can't do anything about it?
Well, good question. Frustration's a good word to describe it. I think it comes and goes in moments. Obviously, you're watching the game and you feel frustrated and upset, and like you just want to kind of be out there to help. And then adding on top the injury, just I think the fact that it was back to back was a little bit disappointing. I remember within the first week of doing it, I didn't feel too bad. I was kind of bouncing back, and then once the severity hit of the length of time that I was, I think, medically going to be out, and I realized I had to go through another rehab process. It took a little bit to get maybe past that again, the mental strength to keep going. And then once you're a couple of weeks in and you're just working on rehab and going through it, it just goes fine. Like, I think I had the MRI scan 3 weeks in, and that showed that it was a bit worse than what we thought. And I remember that week or that couple of weeks being very stagnant. There was no progress. And then about 5 weeks in or something, I really started to notice that it just kind of took off. And here we are. See it coming back, starting to get on the pitch again, healthy, and see what we can do to help to adjust the situation. That's going to be very, very difficult uphill challenge. Yeah.
If you look at this from, let's say, 10,000 feet, you've had the injury that you've been managing whilst at Victory. You went into Brisbane last year, and there was an injury that was picked up again. I don't know if it's the same one. Started the season, there's a knock that you took on, which meant we didn't see you at the start of the season, and then you've had this injury. Just for you personally, that's got to be taxing from a mental perspective. We talked about frustration, but that's a side of the game that people don't typically see. So how has that been to manage for yourself?
Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to perspective, right? I remember moments where it was quite tough, and all of those things, the reoccurrence of it was something I was a little bit unused to. Very fortunately have had a long career where for a lot of it there were smaller injuries, but mostly it was just not being in favor a lot of the time, particularly over in Europe. So this was at times hard, but immediately when you talk about the mental challenge now, my thought goes to it probably was my journey to build resilience again. I'd had time out. I was coming in from probably a less prepared space. Brisbane, I went into the middle of summer and
Brisbane were all coming in for a straight one.
Yeah, try to get myself fit in the middle of summer. I think Melbourne, because I stopped playing after that, it probably speaks a tale of where I was at physically. If I'm talking about that I felt burnt out when I stopped playing, then we're talking about a year before that, so I was already feeling the effects of that. I think it definitely frustrating and definitely very up and down, but I kind of look back on it and looked at it through most of the journey as a chance to build resilience. Even this last injury, I was furiously working with the physios, physio in Hamilton to have different opinions, studying online to work out how you come back faster, what are the things you can do. And unfortunately most of the things is hard work and sitting in ice baths and all these horrible things that just build a toughness that I think will
inside of the Ridges Fitness Centre, Marco.
Yeah. What's the worst thing about rehab? What is the absolute worst thing?
The absolute worst thing?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I guess the pain is probably the first thing. Probably what's also quite big and gives me time for reflection is the loss of the loss of athleticism, like the loss of your
I never had to
capability
deal with that, Marco. Never
What's
had to
that?
deal with, I never had to deal with the loss of it.
Yeah, you would
Yeah, but
never have
it's
been injured
definitely
either, mate.
the
I
because
was
you didn't play.
cents on the dollar on that regard. Cents on the dollar.
Well, yeah, well, yeah, then, yeah, it's that challenge, you know.
Oh man.
That, like, you just, because I would always try and practice gratitude, you know, and so, like, it gave perspective too, because normally you walk into our environment and you forget that it's not a bubble, or that it's a bubble in, like, the world, you know. You're talking about highly capable, physically able athletes, and to not be able to do it, I think it brings a bit of perspective for some of the rest of the world that live in those scenarios.
I'll bring it back to me. It's what I do best.
It's
Marco.
been 3 minutes without a
Yeah,
Jacob
exactly.
Spoonley chat.
Bring it back
So
to me.
yeah, okay.
He's
yeah.
like sweating,
This guy next to me as well. I'm sure he's going to say added, very, very invested Phoenix fan.
Yeah.
We saw you come back from the first injury, and there were 2 games. I think they were actually almost back to back. The Melbourne victory game and then the MacArthur game, and we were promised this system by Chiefy that had been frustrated by circumstance, but it was going to largely revolve around having 2 of the diminutive young Phoenix players that we saw leave our shores early and then they've now come back north of 30. And you actually fed the small Greek bear, Marco, Costa, in 2 games. You got 2 assists, and I was like, wow, this is starting to come alive. And
Yeah.
for me, that compounded the frustration because I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be good. And then we got this injury again, which for you, I'm sure would have, kind of added to that frustration. But there's this promise there that we're just waiting to realize, mate. Did it feel good? I think was the start of the conversation, combining with Costa in that regard.
Yeah, most definitely. I think although the narrative's been played a lot by the external, like the media and the New Zealand, I guess, football, what's the word for a family in a sense, like the greater the fans and everything, we also recognize that we didn't get to play a lot together, so it's really nice. I think we feed off each other quite well, even in the last game, the Auckland game when I came on, I fell into positions that are kind of around him, and he'll drop the ball off and I'll be able to find him again. Like it's quite special to play alongside Costa. We seem to get each other quite well, which makes it very frustrating. The only thing you can kind of say is look forward and hopefully it happen a little bit more. But I think just we probably share the same emotions. And I'm just looking forward to hopefully playing a little bit more alongside him.
I think in the last eight games,
The final 8 games of the season.
Final 8 games of the season. Is that one of the kind of subplot goals that you've got, is to get that combination up and running and to enjoy the football, because it seems that's going to be the avenue to that on-field satisfaction?
I'm hearing a little bit of a perspective too, right, from yourself. Like,
Yeah,
I
exactly,
think it could well help the team if we can get up and running together. I think the very first thought process for myself is to help change the dynamics of the team. I think winning games, obviously, then doing that well. Maybe will those 2 come together? Which one comes first and second, I'm not sure. And as a byproduct, probably most definitely, whether it's myself and Costa, most definitely getting Costa in positions more will equate to the team doing better, I think, because if you look at them last year and this year, like, without him and his goals and the stuff that he does, it wouldn't the team wouldn't have had the same success. And by success this year, I mean the games that we have won.
We've spoken to a number of Auckland FC players over the last few weeks on the pod. We had Max Mata.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah. And I was like, look, as nice as these guys are, we definitely need to get into my favourite team and have a chat to some Wellington Phoenix players. But look, these guys, they're obviously leading into the derby, and then we spoke to Logan Rogerson after the derby. They were absolutely ecstatic, over the moon, and why wouldn't they be? You talk about frustration through managing the injury and all that sort of stuff, Marco, but what about the frustrating thing of turning up to Mount Smart Stadium and not being able to give a proper account of yourselves and being on the receiving end of arguably the worst defeat in Phoenix history?
You'd change the word to describe it, right? For me, that's not frustration. For me, that's like it was like dejection, like it was sadness. It was much different to frustration. Frustration is something doesn't quite go your way. It's like a momentary thing. So are the other ones, but that was harder to take. You can't. I was gonna say you can't escape from it. You can't. I think we're not gonna be able to just pretend that this derby season didn't happen. I spoke to the boys. I can't remember. I think it was after that game or something like that, and I could try and relate it to. There was a season at Victory where we got wiped by City twice. Actually, they won the league, I'm pretty sure, and we finished what might have been like the worst season at that club too.
Was that the when the game at Marvel was 6-0 or something like that, mate? Was that the season you're referring to?
Yeah.
Thanks. I was in the crowd for that. It was pretty surreal,
Cheering
to be
on.
honest.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, this is happening.
City show. So feeling real excited. I think it was 6. Yeah, there was another one where it was like 7-1 or something.
That's your perspective, bro.
I think, I would use a different word to describe that derby loss. It'll probably continue to sink in for everyone involved, even across the years, because it'll be kind of replayed in there. And you could see the difference in where the two teams were at. I guess Auckland playing with a bit of a swagger, and we're struggling a little bit, which is fair. Like, look at where we are on the table and things like that, and painted a picture pretty harsh, like pretty exposing picture, but a picture of probably where we're at.
I'm intrigued to hear you say the word, it was almost like a sadness that came over you and that squad. And I think, we've all experienced sadness in our lives, whether it's, we've had a fight with our loved ones, a mother, father, wife, or whatever, sitting in sadness for how long? Like how long do you sort of dwell on that moment before you've got to pick yourself up and get on with the rest of the season? Because look, it is in isolation just one result, yes, a very, very bad one, but you've still got, from that point, I think it was 9 games left in the season, and still an opportunity to work into the 6. So how quickly do you and the rest of the next players just move on from it?
I don't know how quick you entirely move on from it, but you have to start telling yourself by Tuesday, right? I think we played on the Saturday, traveled back on the Sunday. We talked in the group that it had to be Tuesday. As soon as you step back out on the training pitch, you have to, you never really let go of it, I think, because it becomes your fuel, your motivation. It still impacts you when you're training, but you just have to keep going. It's the same as the injury, same as all setbacks. You have to just keep going if you can. If you have the opportunity, like we did for the 9 games, now for the 8, you have no choice. We're playing, and it's in the A-League, and it's on TV, and it's part of a professional footballing world that it's not grassroots or something where it's not exposed or things like that. You can't afford to just go, okay, well, we're going to stop. We've had these horrible results, a bad season, and we're just going to let it continue to be like that. I don't think, anyway. I think you just have to take it with you, build your resilience, and keep going.
I think Thomas Frank's got a great role, the Brentford manager. It's the 24-hour rule. So after any result,
Right.
amazing, win 6-0, or really disappointing, lose by a lot, he's like 24 hours, moving on.
Well, that's interesting because quite often when it comes to fans, if there's been a heavy defeat, it's like they don't want to see the athletes who have performed or haven't performed in a loss laughing and joking and carrying on so soon after the result. It's like, well, what is the window? Yeah, where you're allowed to grieve and then you're allowed to pick yourself up and move on. I think there's a bit of a grey area for a fan, you know what I mean?
And social media doesn't help, eh?
No.
Because it gives you the insight into how things are within the environment that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I struggle with at times is, to your point, it's a job. So there's going to be aspects of it that are just like business as usual. And then how do you reflect that on the field?
Yeah, because I'm not speaking about the third derby in particular, Marco, but quite often in sports events you've got mates on the other side of the park, and so whether you win, lose or draw at the end of the game, you're going to exchange pleasantries and you might share a joke or whatever, and then that can be misconstrued as, oh, well, this person doesn't care a lot about the result that's just been played out.
It's actually one of the only times that you get to see people as well. It's bizarre, right, Marco? Like, you're on the field, you've got 40,000 people, 15,000 people watching you, and that's your personal space. It's a real kind of paradox in that regard. Like, you're seeing someone you haven't seen for 6 months, and you're doing it with cameras and everyone watching. Yeah, it's hard for people to understand, mate.
For sure. I try and say to the younger players, if anything, I just try and say to them, like, you have to learn to, you acknowledge that, you have to learn to acknowledge that extra responsibility. When you talk about mates in the other team, like, if you've just been beaten like you have, I think you just have to be a little bit smarter than that. Like, I would go and talk to them in the tunnel, and just go and have that conversation there. Like, yes, we're playing on the field, but that's not exactly our space, that's a shared space. And I think, like, also outside, like, for example, here in Wellington, like, I share that space with the population that's here, and some of those are Wellington Phoenix fans. I think it comes down to, as well, like, genuine, like, I think people can sense for the lack of sometimes I say the spoons, I know words in Spanish and I forget them in English.
Hey, mate, you haven't switched into Spanish in conversation yet. We're doing well. We're doing well.
As we discussed last week, I battle with English. So if you get into Spanish, mate, I'm gone. I'm walking out.
We'll chuck some AI up, get a Google Translate down the bottom, mate. You go. Do you, Marco? Off you go, boy.
Yeah, like, if people can sense if it's genuine, like, you can have a life around what you're doing, but understand that what you're doing impacts more people than just yourself, like, very, very intricately. It's not like it's quite, you're doing this work and down the line it's impacting someone. It's like right there, like,
it's immediate.
It's right there, it's immediate. And it's good practice, I think, for mindfulness and, like, what's it called, like, being aware and conscious of what you're doing. Like, if you're aware of the responsibility that you hold, if you're aware of what it means for a fan too, like, what you can do just by listening to them. And at times, if you get it wrong, what's wrong with saying sorry? Like, what's wrong with connecting with the fans and going, yeah, you know what, I can see it from your point of view, and adapting further down the line.
I loved a quote from what you mentioned in your presser during the week, which is, unfortunately, if you look at the performance of the club, although it's tracking in the right direction, last year was a bit of an anomaly, if you want to call it that. Usually you're fighting for a top 6 spot. Last year you're going for the minor premiership and trying to get into the final. And you mentioned that the burden, the additional sacrifice, the sharpness, the selfishness that comes with going at that truly high level is something that you have to learn. I just want to get into that, mate. So you've been at Colo Colo, you've been at Melbourne Victory. What is it like when you are leading the pack, when you are trying to get that silverware? Because it is, in my experience, at a lower level, it's quite taxing. It takes a lot mentally and physically.
Yeah, First, I do want to point out that in victory, I was never fortunate enough to be a part of the teams that did win it. If we're speaking about the A-League, I've always really said to people, look, if you want to understand what it is to win it here, speak to like Costa, especially in our team. Speak to Costa, who's won it 4 times. Speak to Paulo, who was part of a very successful Sydney team. I think my words in the back of that interview stem a lot from my time in Chile, and just in general, like noticing what the teams who were kind of up there would do compared to the lower teams. Chile was it was a experience for me, you know, like it was probably because it was another culture that can even be more invested in, or like the passion and everything in football is huge. The responsibility taken around winning, especially at a club like that, and what is required was it was crazy. Like you had to be aware of all of these things. Like you there really, if you're smiling with the opposition team on the pitch, you're in some serious trouble, you know. Like the year before I arrived, they had just beaten relegation, I believe. They had to play a playoff game, and the boys were saying that like life around it, like they going out for dinner and doing things like that was not an option. You know, it was an unpleasant option if you decided to take it on. Like the world.
How
over
unpleasant was it,
Yeah,
Marco?
what?
Was it like almost dangerous? Like you put yourself in harm's way by going out and when the team's not doing well?
Typically, when I'm not doing well, I just have to put up with G, mate. But
And that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Nobody likes to be hanging out one-on-one with a Croat, eh?
You're gonna get if any Chile Colo Colo fan sees it, you just close your Instagram now, man, I reckon.
Oh, really?
No, it is. Well, I wasn't there to experience it, but like for example, we played our derby game, and we were like top of the league at that stage, and we decided that we were gonna take a different bus than what we normally do, and our bus was peppered with rocks. You know, like this thing means so much. I remember a couple of stories of the boys saying that when they were fighting relegation, people would just come up to them when they're at dinner, because they come up to you when you're doing really well and it's a photo, and they were like, it was like, what are you doing here? You know, like how can you be happy? How can you be celebrating? How can you be smiling when the team is?
How can you be eating?
How can you be eating? Yeah. How can you be eating? Give me that. No. It's because just little things like that, and so it built in that team this huge desire to win. And I think just in general, like when you look at people or athletes and stuff like that, like you have to be very focused on what you do. Like I think it's like winning is not just going out and playing. It's like, unfortunately, I learned it across my career. It's like it's competition. You have to overcome someone else or another team, and in order to do that, you have to be able to do it more, do it smarter, or something like that. And that requires like hours of practice and preparation and a building of a character. I think that allows that. Or the Auckland team, like yes, it was built organically too, but also started from the start of the season. You know, I think they got the formula right. And I think I heard a story, might be corrected if I'm wrong, that things like, for example, I think they got banned from shopping on like away games or something because there was one game they did it and they lost, you know, like things like that, you know, like the sacrifices that it takes for my injury to come back faster meant that I was at the club till like 4 o'clock on most days. And the first thing I do when I arrive was sit in the ice bath for 8 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever. Like that's a sacrifice. I don't wake up going, yeah, that's what I want to go and do. I just wake up. And it's just, I think it amounts to a lot of sacrifice, I think.
Also, at the same press conference, I think we may have been watching the same one separately. We don't hang out all the time, Marco. You made mention of the fact, and you've spoken about this throughout your career, you like to lead with your actions, and you don't like speaking in a group setting so much. So how do you impart your knowledge about success and the selfishness that's required and all of that sort of carry on to get to the absolute pinnacle of the A-League or football in Chile or whatever it might be, to such a young, inexperienced Phoenix squad? Like, there is a void of leadership there at the moment, outside of yourself and Costa Barbarouses, Tim Payne, Roos. Yeah, okay. The more I talk, the more I realise there is actually a lot of leadership.
But he's got youngsters with Luke Brooks-Smith, Nathan Walker, they're coming through.
That's right, the young kids coming through. Like, how do you ensure that they are well-versed in what it takes to be a really good and really successful professional footballer?
You have to go out of your comfort zone. Especially myself, like, I had to go out of my comfort zone. I think just even this conversation, if you'd set this up earlier in my career, you wouldn't have got much from me, I don't think. I think I've grown a lot as a person across my career. I think the challenges that I faced built or increased like the character that I have around these things. I also learned a lot and acknowledged what these things can do, like I think if I advise footballers now, I advise them to go straight, like head first into all of those things that make them uncomfortable. That's where all of the growth is as a person, as a player. And in terms of what we're going through at the moment, like I enjoy. It's still hard for me to get up in front of the group, but I'll do it a couple of times if I need to, just to say some things. But individually, like with Lukey, like, or just any of the young boys, just at the start when I arrived, like getting to know them and then just saying, hey, look, if there's anything that you need, please do come past. And some of them come past, and the other ones need a little bit of like a reminder. Hey, again, I'm here if you need. Like, and then I've become real keen. Like, I remember from my days and like my younger days, and just sometimes in general when you talk with like a different generation, particularly an older one, sometimes they'll impart advice, I think, when you're not really looking for it. And it's important.
I hate it when that happens, eh? I didn't ask you, man. Like, shut your mouth.
Impose the advice.
But that would imply that you think you're in a different generation.
Yeah.
So we won't go into that. They have to be looking for it as well. Like, I try not to talk too much if they're not, unless it's like, hey, have you perhaps thought about this different perspective? I think it's a delicate balancing act, but something that you have to do. Otherwise, I think as an older player, you're wasting a little bit of the experiences if you don't really do that.
You're slowing down their development, aren't you? If you're holding
like,
back,
they have to learn it and go through it, which you want to avoid, I think, a lot of the stuff.
And it's something that Borley was talking about in episode 2, right? The fact that when he was maybe coming through, there wasn't that... The leaders basically shunned the youngsters from speaking in the changing room, and he wanted it to be that when he was the older head, the experienced player, that everybody had the opportunity to talk, because you're all part of the same team. There's no hierarchical thing going on here. We're all striving towards the same goal. Why couldn't the 17-year-old in the corner, a la Marco Rojas back in the day, sharing a dressing room with Paul Eiffel, Chris Greenacre and the like, why can't he talk? Why can't he chime in with something to say?
I think my experience with when I was coming up is that you'd almost have to beat them out. You'd have to, win against them in order to establish speaking rights, let's say in your example.
Right.
Whereas that's very different now. There's a professional element to it, right, Marco, where, to your point, there's a generational transfer of intellectual property, and I think in New Zealand we're getting a lot better at that because we're just too small. We don't have 50 teams, we've got 2, and we need to make those the best environments possible. So I think from my perspective, looking at it from one generation to another and now to another, that's cool. Like, that's the fact that we're all starting to kind of work together, and there's a collaborative element to it, which I think is something to be celebrated.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, I'll just speak for myself because it's important to do that. It's without the young players in our team, I probably wouldn't it would be harder for me to have a lot of enthusiasm for like each day of training, because physically it's more of a grind for an older player. And then you look over at, like, it keeps you young in a sense in some cases, and we have stuff that they don't have. Like, it should be collaboration. Like, otherwise the idea is what? Well, we know we have all the answers. We don't. They have a new look at, or way of doing things. They have information to impart. They will help us during the season, you know, like with moments when they come on and things like that, just as we did for the teams that we were coming into. Although I don't know if it's equal. I think there still is hierarchy, and I think that's still important. It just needed to look different to what it used to, I think. And sometimes there are places where it's gone too far the other side, and it's just a game of bringing it all together and putting it together well, yeah.
I'll preface this by saying that the Australians love imparting a nickname on Kiwis. They love extracting a single fact and making that their identity. Ben Old, golfer.
Yeah.
Luke Brooks-Smith,
BMX. Yeah.
Marco Rojas, Kiwi Messi.
Blessing
That's
or a
my
curse to be
identity.
Yeah,
would
how
be
do you
pretty
feel
clear,
about that?
wouldn't
Be
it?
blunt and honest, Marco.
Your question was, what do I think of
The nickname.
nickname?
Yeah.
Not too much of it, to be honest. I came up again. I was so lucky, like teammates with Odegaard at Heerenveen, and that was the Norwegian one, you know. And he was
So in the same team you had the Norwegian Messi and the Kiwi Messi.
for the media, yes. I didn't call him that, no. And he was different level, you know, and so is the original. I think I've always said, like, there are worse nicknames out there. It's pretty cool to have people say those things because it's a positive thing, but that's probably as far as that connection goes, you know. And what it meant for me was, it was just like a positive thing in the media and the football world, you know. Like, I think there was a phase where people were doing it all the time anyway. I think they're always trying to do it. Like, people want to look for the new person coming in, that because another player is gonna be going out eventually. So it's like, oh, where can we find the next
Iteration.
one? And I'm
Yeah.
sure they'll do it to other young kids too. I don't even know what to say to that question, mostly because it's just like, well, no one's ever called me that outside of like
A commentary
news
box.
articles or or a
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Oh, so it's not happening when you turn up to Wellington Phoenix training like, oh, the Kiwi Messi's here. Yeah, get him, mate.
Nah, but sometimes I'll joke about it, and that's about it. And then they see my left foot, and they're like, "Oh, actually, it's not." Yeah,
Well,
Never
what
mind.
was Odegaard's left foot like?
yeah, a wand.
Best player you've played with?
I would, yeah, I think pretty close. Yeah, yeah. I'm just in case I forget about another one, but yeah, like he's the first player that I probably saw live, like so close up, be able to play with just like the one. Like, you know how you like, oh, there are some players that just play with their left foot or something, and he
Yeah.
could do it and
No one could touch
barely
him.
lose the ball. He was good.
I want to take everybody back to 2006 when I went to Croatia for 2.5 weeks. And while
Right.
it was a very drunken time, it was a spiritual experience for me, because being half Croat, it was awesome to be in the home of my father and
Yeah.
his grandparent, my grandparents.
Home
and,
of
and so on.
Rakia as well.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Had enough for a
Spiritual,
lifetime.
Yeah, steer well clear of Rakia, kids. Don't
But
do
see,
that.
like, because I haven't had the Croatian upbringing, it was a really strange time, because I've got the ridiculously difficult name to say, Goran Zdravko Paladin, and here I am speaking like a Kiwi, mate. How's it
Yeah.
going, man? And so, like, you hand over your passport and they're talking in their language to me. I've got no idea what they're saying. But that wouldn't have been the case for you, Marco, because even though you grew up in Hamilton, played for Hamilton Wanderers and all that, you grew up Chilean. So when you go and play for Colo Colo, you don't have those same issues. You were able to assimilate to the environment. So what was that like, being, you know, I suppose thrust into an environment that you've known all your life?
It's kind of the same as this Phoenix environment. Like, it was familiar, but it was also quite new too. Like, can't forget that I grew up in New Zealand with a family that was Chilean, a Chilean family that were exiled from their country in the 70s. So we grew up from that perspective. I think I kept the language, the family connection, like very family orientated. That's how I was brought up, around a lot of family. But aside from that, Chile was still a very exposing place. And there's, from the accent to the way people spoke to the fact that I was Kiwi and Chilean and born over here and spent most of my time here. It wasn't like I still was a little bit different to what was there, to them.
You were
And,
somewhere
but
in
it was just
between
really
Kiwi
cool, like,
and Chilean, Marco. That's
Huh?
kind of how. Did it feel like you were somewhere in between Kiwi and Chilean?
yeah, I think I've always kind of felt like that, like my last name and speaking, having two cultures growing up. Like, I think it's always been a case of very fond for both countries. New Zealand's where I grew up and home, and Chile always had a special place. Been there a few times, but to go and live there was real special. Real special. Help with that connection. I do really want to go back. But it wasn't always like I was like, oh, I completely fit in here. It was also very exposing too.
All right, let's get to the other end of that journey then. Why Hamilton? Out
Oh,
of
yeah.
everywhere,
It's pretty,
Hamilton.
It's a pretty simple. It's a serious answer, to be fair. Like, when you have to flee your country and you have not much, you
Hamilton's a great option.
and that's
Hamilton's
where
a
you-
I'm
great
not
option.
laughing at the situation. I'm laughing at this backhanded insult that Hamilton's getting. Keep going, Marco. You're doing great.
I know where you're going with that. But we got our own about Aucklanders, so it's
good. Yeah.
yeah. I think Hamilton, for like where they came from, was probably
Milk and
paradise,
honey,
you
was
know?
it?
And I think the question is, why'd you stay there so long, maybe? That I can't answer.
You were like institutionalized, you know, you couldn't leave. This is all I've ever known, guys. I'm staying in Hamilton.
I don't think you're going to get the ambassador cap from Seamus anytime soon off the back of that. Starting 11, Marco.
Yeah.
And here's your starting 11.
All right, mate. What is the worst ground you've ever had to travel to?
One of the island grounds for sure. Probably Honiara or something for sure.
Yeah, Honiara. It's just so hot, mate. Completely agree. All right, pre-match meal.
Banana's definitely there. I probably like the peanut butter banana on toast or honey banana on toast. Yeah.
Sounds nice. Might have one of those this afternoon. Who
Wait,
is
got a
your
match?
Yeah, I've got a match. Who is your all whites roommate?
I had a few. Costa for a little bit. Ryan Thomas. Back when we were there in there together. And the last one I went to, I think I was by myself, which was good.
Senior statesman. Don't mind that. This one's redundant, I think, but we'll ask it anyway. Golf handicap, Marco.
No, I don't have it. Just played it.
No golf handicap yet, mate. All
So
right.
much like Logan Rogerson last week, he's scratch, is he?
He's scratch. Yeah, exactly, mate.
He's a scratch golfer.
The place you want to go back to after you've finished playing.
South America.
I thought we were about to say Hamilton at the same time.
Oh, I was supposed to, yeah, bring it back up. My bad. Hamilton.
Whereabouts in South America, mate? Have you got anywhere in particular?
Good question. I would like to go back to, definitely Chile or Brazil. I think, yeah.
Well, they might be coming up in the road to the World Cup, Marco, so we'll wait and see. First club.
Melville United, I think it is, or Melville FC in Hamilton. Melville and then West Ham, yeah.
West Hamilton. Just to be
West
clear, the way,
Hamilton.
Marco.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, I think people know it's not. Yeah, I don't go from Melville and Hamilton to West Ham in England, yeah. And then come back to Hamilton.
Who is your favourite non-footballing athlete?
I really like tennis, actually. It would have been Federer.
Oh, yeah.
Federer.
You and
Nice.
me, mate. Same. The one-handed backhand.
Yeah,
absolute class, eh?
the timing
And
style.
in an age where everyone's moving to the two-handed
Yes.
backhand as well, and he just stayed elegant. Loved him for it.
Actually, on this, the headband.
Yeah.
Loved the headband. Headband was
Oh,
good.
early days with the long hair.
Yeah. That's what we need to do, Marco, as part of the rehab. Grow the hair out. Bring back the power.
Yes,
The
yes.
power of the Jon Snow, mate. That's what we need.
I would definitely consider it. Yeah.
That's a no. That's a
Yeah,
soft
in other
no.
words, it's not happening. Yeah, nice try, Spoon. Nice try.
What's the movie that you want to go back and watch for the first time?
There's a Chilean movie. I don't know what it was called, so I'm not much up here. But I remember. I think I'd love to go back to the experience of it. Watched it for the first time with my grandma, and it was the first time I watched a culturally sensitive like movie like that. It was a very political one, and I remember how much she resonated with it, and I'd love to go back to that moment to watch that movie again for all of it together. I'll find out the name. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that.
No, that's fine. So it was about Pinochet's regime, was it?
It was about what was happening within that regime. Yeah,
What was the team that you supported growing up?
Colo Colo.
Yeah, there you go. What is the worst injury that you've had, mate?
You don't have many to choose from.
Like I said, I actually think I was mostly fortunate because they were usually smaller ones. Like I think the ankle, because I did it when I first came to the Phoenix. I've done it now. I think the accumulation of the ankle injuries, if there's one spot that's been affected by my career, it's the right ankle.
What is your coffee order?
No, I don't drink coffee. Yeah,
Don't drink
No
Coffee.
coffee.
Tea?
yeah, green tea. Yeah,
Green tea. Purist.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Thank you, Marco.
no problem.
And here's your starting 11.
Hey, before we let you bail, the All Whites are playing in the World Cup qualifiers later this month, and obviously the World Cup is next year. If the body's right and the form is good, how desperate are you to be involved in a World Cup campaign across Canada, US, Mexico next year?
How desperate am I? Oh, I think I touched on it in the interview that I did recently. Like I can't lie and say that it's like I'm gonna get there at all costs. You know, I learned to. I think I changed a bit when I stopped playing, and then came back in. I kind of will take it as it comes. I've been out of it for a while. If I look from now, like I've started one game this whole season. I don't know actually. I would really. It's definitely a dream that I hold to play in the World Cup. But if I was to be honest, I'm in a bit of a space where I'm just going through going week by week and seeing where it takes me.
Chile have had some fantastic teams. I think you're of a similar generation to me. Who was the hero growing up? Was it Zamorano? Was it Salas?
No, they were a little bit like, that was my early years, man.
Don't do that. Don't. Answer the question.
You're not in Marco's bracket anymore, Jake.
Close. You almost.
Try to
You
walk
almost
it
got
back.
I think for me, although they were the first, I remember the '98 World Cup.
Yep.
They were the first striking partnership, or like that. It was really exciting to watch, especially for Chileans. It would be. The first one for me would be Matias Fernandez, and then the probably better one, the one that was around for most of Chile's recent success would be like Sanchez Vidal.
Or maybe you could have instead of growing the hair long, maybe you could do the mohawk like Vidal.
Please don't. I swear.
I want to see you rocking that next game, mate.
The power of Rojas comes from the long hair. Let's bring that back. Campaign. Yellow fever. Get on it.
I'll consider the long hair, probably not the mohawk. I think I just don't know. I don't know if I can take the risk. The rest of it won't grow back. You know?